Welcome. Thanks for joining me again for another class on telling yourself the truth. I remember when I was going to school, I had to take classes on Greek philosophy. And I thought, what a waste of time. We studied Gnosticism especially. And I thought, this is such a waste. I'm not going to run into a Gnostic within 1,000 miles of anywhere I move. So why do I need to understand how the Gnostics thought? And for that matter, any Greek philosophy. You see, Greek philosophy, the Gnostics and the Platonianists, they all had this dualism. They felt that the flesh was evil, that their bodies were evil, that there is no good in the flesh. In fact, for them, salvation was to escape the body, escape from the flesh. And what was really important was the mind. It was superior to the body. And so the influence that you see in Christianity and the things that the early writers had to try to help Christians through was this idea that your body was evil, some sort. Ascetics came out of this idea that our bodies were evil, coming out of this Greek philosophy, the asceticism, that you should treat your body harshly and with contempt. And because it was shameful, it was worthless, it was unimportant. And especially with sex. Sex was the greatest evil of all. And so the New Testament writers had to come around and say, no, you know what? The Gnostics don't have it right. And places like Colossians, the 2nd chapter, he says in verse 20, if you have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world, why, as if you were living in the world, do you submit to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch? They were trying to say, you shouldn't give in to the pleasures of the body. Do not taste, do not touch. In 1 Timothy, the 4th chapter, you have this same kind of idea here. He says, but the Spirit explicitly says that in later times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons, by means of the hypocrisy of liars seared in their own conscience, as with a branding iron. Men who forbid marriage and advocate abstaining from foods which God has created to be gratefully shared in by those who believe and know the truth. You see, there's those that would try to get people to not get married, to abstain from certain food. They say your body is evil, so sexual desires have to be repressed. The Bible, Christianity, is very liberating. It is totally revolutionary. Because the Bible teaches us that the flesh, the body, was created by God for good. That our bodies have purpose. That there is design in our bodies. Every single organ, every single cell has design. Well, Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. And I'm glad now that I study Greek philosophy because I see things happening now that reminds me so much of this dualism that we see in Greek philosophy. People are now telling us that our bodies are inferior, that it must be defined by our minds. And so we need to learn to tell ourselves the truth about our body. And it would make a big difference in the way so many live and enjoy their lives today if they would just learn to tell the truth about their bodies and learn to love their bodies. I want to start off with somewhat a sad story of Karen Carpenter. Karen Carpenter grew up in the area I grew up in. I had some friends that sang in choir with her. And had a beautiful voice. And along with her brother, Richard Carpenter, they made up the singing group, the Carpenters. And they were a highly successful group, very popular group in the 1970s, had many popular songs. Karen was known for her angelic voice. She had this wonderful, rich voice, but she was also known for her strict diets. Her normal body weight would be about 140. That's what we'd call maybe the set point of your body. She was just felt good at 140 pounds, but then she began to diet and she went down to 120 pounds. And eventually she went down to 90 pounds in the mid-70s. From 140 to 90 pounds. She died in 1983 at the age of 32 from a massive heart attack that was brought on by anorexia nervosa. I remember that very well. That was the first time I ever heard the term anorexia nervosa. Anorexics, anorexia. There are people who have a eating disorder. They feel like there's a fear that they're going to gain weight. And this often goes along with bulimia. Bulimia is another eating disorder where someone will eat a lot of food and they'll purge, they'll vomit. And so anorexia and bulimia are both from this problem of looking at their bodies as something that is not what they want them to be. Distortion of their body image. We still not sure the exact cause of anorexia or bulimia, but we know that the result is that they fear gaining weight, and there's a tremendous abuse of their bodies because of this distortion. How do you view your body? Christianities take this holistic approach that our body and our mind are integrated. There's a unity between our bodies and our minds, that they should be one and the same. Everything was created with a purpose, with a design. Every single organ, every single cell of our body has some kind of design. We have eyes for seeing, we have ears for hearing. We look at the animals around us. Birds have wings for flying. We see design in all the things around us and in our own bodies. Our bodies were made with this tremendous design by God. And what do you think today? Do people overvaluate their bodies or devaluate their bodies? I think we see both extremes. I mean, there's this high value on fitness today, high value on fitness and appearance. People seem to be obsessed with diets and with exercise, with bodybuilding, cosmetics and plastic surgery and Botox and anti-aging creams, and Photoshop can be pretty helpful too. Christians should recognize that our bodies are from God. Our body is a gift from God. And so there's a stewardship aspect. We should treat our bodies with care and respect and with discipline. But the extremes we need to avoid. We need to watch out that we don't go to extremes in one way or the other. We must treat our bodies and we must treat everyone with dignity and respect. One of the hot topics today that deals with the way we view our bodies is transgenderism. Transgenders. A transgender person is someone who thinks that they're living in the wrong body. There's a mismatch between their physical sex and their psychological gender. That they were born with one sex, but they feel really like they are another gender, a different gender. Some assume that this is a biological, chemical problem going on in their bodies. Some think it's some kind of hormonal cause. But to date, there's no real clear scientific evidence for what causes someone to feel like they are in the wrong body. But there's a disconnect between the body and the mind in their brain. And in our culture, if there's a disconnect between your body, what your body says, and what your mind is telling you, what your brain is telling you, then we go with what our brain says, what our mind says. If there's a disconnect, then our body is wrong. And so we have to change our body. And people are doing that today through hormones and surgery to make their body match their feelings. Recently on Time Magazine, you had Ellen Page, who is transitioned to Elliot Page. Ellen Page was young woman as an actress who, when I first was introduced to her as an actress, she's felt like in her mind that she was a boy. And I don't know what she's done exactly to transition as a boy. She's taken on a new appearance and wants to be called he and him, and those types of pronouns. And I don't know if she's had surgery yet. Some people go through having a complete mastectomy. Some have gender realignment. Their sexual organs are realigned. I don't know what she's gone through. I know a lot of people have gone through some extreme hormonal treatments and some extreme surgical treatments to try to get their bodies to match their mind. Biological sex is not as important as the psychological feelings of gender in our culture. And so we have all these newly minute terms: bigender, pangender, gender fluid. And the number of genders could be virtually limitless, since they have nothing to do with biology. They have everything to do with something going on in a person's mind, their thoughts towards their body. And so what they're talking about, their idea is to embrace their authentic self, what they're feeling in their mind, and trying to get their body to match what they're feeling in their mind. And there has been a spike in the number of teens who have been identifying as transgender. Some have gone through surgery, extreme surgeries. Some gone through hormonal treatments. And there's an interesting thing that's going on as well. If you go onto YouTube, you'll find more detransitioning right now than transitioning. For a while, we saw people transitioning like Ellen Page into Elliot Page. And now we're seeing people who are rethinking this thought. And some of them are, who were women who were transitioned into becoming a man, and men transitioning to be a woman, and now they're having regrets. They say, that didn't bring me the satisfaction I was wanting. That did not fulfill me as I thought. But now they're trying to go back to their original gender, their original sexual alignment that they had at birth, their sex. And yet there's been terrible damage done to their bodies. They've mistreated their bodies. And so we've got to learn to love and accept our bodies. God made us. He said, I'm going to make them male and female. He made us male and female in His likeness. He gave us purpose. Every cell of our body has purpose. Some time ago, there was a TED Talk by a cardiologist named Paula Johnson. And in this popular TED Talk, here's what she said. She said, every cell has a sex. And what that means is that men and women are different down to the cellular, molecular level. It means that we're different across all of our organs, from our brains to our hearts, our lungs, our joints. In other words, no matter what you think, your hormones, your body is going to always be the sex it was assigned at birth. It's always going to be male or female. Let me read you another insightful comment by a person, Nuruddin Knight. I think that's how she says her name. Nuruddin was a different name for me. And here's what it says. And this is from Love Thy Body by Nancy Pearcey. Why are we not encouraging people to have a higher view of the body? Nuruddin Knight, a black woman writing for the Witherspoon Institute, says the transgender movement reminds her of a time not so long ago when light-skinned black people sometimes passed as white. She asks, isn't there a parallel when a man passes as a woman, or the reverse? In both cases, the underlying motive seems to be a form of self-hate. A black person who wants to be white is practicing self-hate. And so is a man who wants to be a woman, or a woman who wants to be a man. Knight asks, Why won't we encourage people to love the body they're in? We tell women to love their curves and love their age and love the skin they're in, but we don't tell them, and men, to love the sex of their bodies. You know, it's an amazing thing to see nowadays, adolescents, and I remember being an adolescent. I don't know if there was ever anybody who went through an easy time at adolescence. During adolescence, it's difficult to accept ourselves. You know, we're not as smart, as popular as we want to be. We're not as outgoing as we want to be. We don't have as many friends as we want to be. Our bodies are not what we want them to be. We're going through these changes that are very confusing. And so it's easy to come to the conclusion, well, maybe I'm in the wrong body. I read some time back one woman, and she was talking about growing up, and she said it was very difficult for her because she was bigger than everybody else. She was a big-boned person. She said all through grade school, she was bigger than all the guys. And even into high school, she says, I wasn't until I was a senior in high school that the boys finally started to catch up with me a little, but I was still bigger than most of the guys. And she said, and I didn't like feminine things we identify as feminine. She said, I didn't like that. I didn't like wearing dresses. I didn't like frilly things. I wanted to go outside. I wanted to do sports. She said, I wanted to be with the boys. And she said, you know, I would have had the idea that maybe I was in the wrong body, except that she was a Christian woman. She goes, it said that God made you male or female, and he made me a female, so I knew I had to be a female. So when she got into college, she began to accept her body a little bit more as a woman. She still didn't do the stereotypical things that we think of as female, but she began to accept herself and found a man that liked her, and they fell in love, and they got married, and she's happily married now and has 2 kids. And when she reflects back, she says, I'm so glad I went through childhood then and not today, because if I was going through today, there would have been a pressure on me to convince myself and others that I was in the wrong body. You know, we need to be careful of the stereotypes that we push on people. There are these stereotypes that we try to get people to fall into, but not everybody's the same. In the book of Genesis, there's the story of Jacob and Esau. And I'm sure if you're a Christian, you know that story of Jacob and Esau. They're twins. Jacob, he was kind of what we'd say as a girly man. He was kind of on the feminine side. He was a mama's boy. He liked to cook. He liked the things that sometimes we identify as feminine things. And then on the other side was Esau. Esau was a manly man. He was a hairy man. He was a hunter. He and his dad, they got along really well. And we see that this divide in the family, the mom like Jacob, the dad like Esau, caused some real serious problems. But you know, the thing is about both of those is they are both males. And we need to realize that there's a spectrum for what it means to be male. Some men are very artistic, they're very sensitive, and some men have no sensitivity at all, and they're on the other extreme. They're tough, and they're ready for a fight. And when we think about this, and the same thing is true for women. We have this spectrum of what it means to be female. We have on the one side the very feminine, sensitive girl, and we have the other side we sometimes call a tomboy, the girl who's rough and rugged. You know, we buy our kids toys. You know, sometimes if you have a little girl, you buy them princesses, and everything has little princesses on them. And if you had a boy, my kids were young, you bought them Ninja Turtles. But you know, sometimes girls like the Ninja Turtles, and boys like the more feminine things. It doesn't mean that they're not any less male or any less female. And we need to recognize that, because right now we have some very sweet, talented, sensitive children who are confused about their gender. I see the interviews, and I've watched so many of the interviews of these people who are so confused, who've gone and transitioned and still don't feel really really well in their entire body, and it's really painful to watch because they are so sweet and they are so sensitive, and they've been taught to accept that the body has no purpose. I mean, this is the end result of the teaching of evolution, that your body was here by an accident and there's no purpose and there's no designing it at all. And so they tried to transition. The problem is, what does it feel like? What does it feel like to be a girl? What does it feel like to be a man? You know, you have this man who says, you know, I feel like I'm a girl. What does that feel like? Or a girl says, I feel like I'm a man. What does that feel like? You see, we're going by what's happening in our mind rather than our body. And our mind and our body should coordinate with one another. We are physically, every single part of us, either male or female. And no matter how you change the way you dress, the way you act, those are still going to be there. You're still going to have the same DNA code for male or for female. And so we need to learn to tell the truth about our bodies. Tell yourself the truth. You're a male. Maybe you're confused at what that means to be a male. You're a female. Maybe you're confused. But you need to accept yourself the way you are. To accept that maybe you're a sensitive guy. Or maybe you're just a tough girl. You're still a male. And you're still a female. You know, Karen Carpenter is so sad. She was a beautiful, talented young woman who needed help. She needed compassion. And so do these people who are going through this transgender issues in their life. We need to tell ourselves the truth about our bodies and love our bodies. And as Christians, we need to love and accept everybody and help them as they try to recognize who they are and who God intends them to be. Well, thanks for joining me for this class. I hope you have a great week. May God bless you all.